This podcast is actually an online event, a part of our online graduation exhibition called BHCD GD Class of 2020. And this event/podcast is specifically dedicated to Maria Andrianova and Natasha Kukina and their processes and their projects. You could access other events and look at other projects through a link class of2020.online. I hope you enjoy and make sure to check out other projects. Thank you. Hi everyone, this is our quarantine edition of the Be Kind podcast. We are recording from our houses via Skype.
I'm not in a house, bitch. You two rich ass
Apartments, houses,
bougie ass.
Classy, bougie, Rachel.
You got me.
What's happening? What's happening?
Okay.
I'm a savage.
Stop referencing TikToks. Let me do an introduction. This talk is going to be about the way we present and systemize the information. And lately I came to realization that basically every graphic design task is in essence the systematization and presenting the information. What I think is that my approach within my project is really different from yours, Masha and Natasha. And within my project, I come up with assignments every week or so. Therefore, I chop my project into mini projects. So this is the way I tackle this huge task. Now I want to hear a few words. How do you tackle this huge project, and how do you describe your projects just in a few words?
I guess it's also an important point to mention in relation to systems that for me a question and a problem of choice is always very problematic and I really struggle with making choices. So for me creating systems is a way to avoid making as many choices as I can. So I started my project with a very specific starting point. I realized that it's for me the only way to actually start doing something is to start with something very specific and very concrete and just stick with it till the end. So yeah, I chose a symbol of a fist as a topic of my project, and I just started researching and exploring it from different points of view. So yeah, basically I created a system around this one thing, categorized things that can relate to it, and then created systems upon those systems, and then systems upon those systems, and so on. So yeah, it's like an inception sort of thing. Wait, look, I locked my cat out on the balcony. I got it.
And Masha, what about you?
I would say that my project isn't really about the system. If to explain the project, I wouldn't say that this is about systems. I would say that it's about this specific thing. And so I'm working with the artifact from my hometown, and I treat it as a precious thing. But systems is the thing that helps me to do that. So in overall, speaking about these systems, they are the things that help me, but not necessarily the most important thing in the project. Mm-hmm. It's just the way I just work.
Maybe you could say a few words about what system is for you, because I think everybody gets it in different way, and it's not entirely understandable what do you mean by a system, and because it's different for everybody.
Well, for me, yeah, we talk that we define that somewhat differently, and I don't know, for me the system is the thing that I just came back to in every step of the of the way, meaning that it's not just in the work, but it's also in life. And Nat agreed with me when we were preparing for this talk that this is something that was always with us in the way we structure. For me personally, it's the way I structure the day, for example, or the tasks I need to do, or how I do them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, it's also like a very big part of my life, and I agree that this thing was always within me. It's not something that only applies to my graphic design practice. It applies to everything that I do. And like, for me, systems are a way of bringing stability into life. So if there is a system and I can stick to it, that means that like the future is more predictable, and it helps a lot with my anxiety. So yeah, I guess when defining,
as you said, said, it's the matter of making a choice and then referring back to this choice, making new ones.
Yeah.
Something like this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So when you kind of somewhat artificially limit your choices for your future self, so it's in the future it's easier for you to make decisions.
We are somewhat different in that anyways, because you remember you said you refer to them as a systems, and I always say that I refer to them as a organization. And that for me it's more of a how I organize how I work, and not how the project functions without me, maybe. Am I
Yeah, I understand.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not the way how project functions and how it is structured but the way how you organize the work around the project, right?
Yeah, maybe.
I think to me it comes to the fact that in your projects and in your maybe life in general, you are maybe less intuitive within your choices, and you rely more on logic and like the best case scenario for every decision. Am I right?
Well, isn't that what everybody does to some extent? I mean,
well, yeah, but I think it comes to a fact that, at least for me and my projects, I'm more intuitive, and I kind of choose without any like systematization in my head, and I don't rely. I rely on what I like and what I feel like doing, and not on the overall like structure. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it does, but I wouldn't really agree that those two things are not. For me, they come hand in hand. Like, you can't really avoid your bias and avoid concentrating on things that you like. You still end up doing things that you like and things that feel right, but just I guess what I could characterize it as like the level of, like, the amount of decisions that are subconscious is lesser. Yeah, so I guess if I'm thinking about how you work, for example, and how me or Masha work, I think more me and Masha, we make we make our decisions kind of like based on the decisions that we've already made before in this project, and you just like decide over and over again. I don't know. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but yeah, I guess it's just like more. I guess, yeah, it's less intuitive and more logical. And sometimes, actually, I think this is like the biggest drawback of this approach, because it's not like an approach we chose consciously, really. It's just something that like happened. Working this way can result in making things that feel kind of rigid and too strict and too dry. Because sometimes I think, well, I can speak for myself that sometimes my work is too thought out and too cold, and it lacks this like humane quality, and sometimes it lacks excitement. And well, systems are exciting for me, but I understand that like for the outside viewer, everything being super strict and organized and systematized is not the most exciting thing. So
yeah, maybe that's what I thought by saying something could be intuitive and something could be organized and systemized. I get it.
We both started actually with the same thing. We chose something. That's just the design itself. You pick something and you work on it. But what I'm saying is that then you I don't know, maybe we are not giving up on our systems and the way we work, and we really keep it on like schedule, maybe just knowing what step goes after another, maybe not like shuffling around, maybe. Whatever I did shuffle a lot, so I don't know.
Yeah, to be honest, for me, I guess it's true for you too, at least from what I understand, is that our initial intent for the project and what the project ended up being are two very different things. Like for example, I started working with the fist symbol thinking that my project's gonna be like about it and I'm gonna like work with it, but in the end my project became kind of like self-referential, and it became more about the process of the project itself rather than the initial symbol. So for me, and it happens a lot to me, where I think I just like, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I'm just like stating the fact that I got carried away with the process and with all the systematization and stuff. And yeah, in the end my project kind of deviated a lot from what I thought it would be. So yeah,
but I think it's a good thing.
I guess it was already mentioned in an interview with Martin, but I think for me this project was very, I don't know, beneficial in finding out what my work process really is, because this is the first time we were really, really like left alone and left on our own. So this thing kind of happened naturally, and I'm really happy that it did, because I think it's much more valuable to know where you end up if you're left on your own, rather than like just making a project about like a thing.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and like I think everybody would agree that our like final bachelor project made us realize how we work and how we resolve some issues and how we work with time management, and just gave us an opportunity to understand what self-initiated and independent work is for us.
And coming back to like the topic of organization and systems and like time management, I guess, I find like the moments where I struggle the most with getting myself to do something and make something and work are when I actually have to make decisions. So like when when I know what I have to do, when like the system that I created has already dictated me what my next step is, it's really easy for me to get to do it, and I have no trouble in actually sitting down and dedicating a lot of my time and effort to it. So for example, with my project, when I knew I had to collect an array of images, I knew that I had to categorize them, I had to label them, I had to write captions for them, I had to put them into different like folders and stuff. And that part, even though it was very labor intensive, it was kind of easy for me because I just knew that this is what had to be done, and I was just doing it. But then in the moments where I actually had to, like come up with what I have to do, this is where I struggle the most. And because of this, I don't know, this is gonna get kind of psychotherapeutic and #deep, but this is why I often doubt that I'm a creative person, even though like just the term creative itself is like a separate topic for conversation. But yeah, I just sometimes think that maybe choosing a creative air quotes profession wasn't the best choice for me, because sometimes people see those moments of like coming up with ideas as the act of creativity and creation. And I enjoy making something within like the guidelines more, and it's easier for me, even though those guidelines I might have created for myself just earlier. And sometimes it feels like, well, I'm just like an executor, and I'm not really a creator, I'm not really an author of something. And yeah, but I think this is what differs graphic design from like fine art, is that this approach and this systematization is a very big part of what we do. And yeah, we also discussed it with Masha many times at this point. I think what Sebastian told us at the like introduction lecture that he gave us on foundation, that he told that graphic design, a good designer,
that you should be lazy creating those machines that would work for you.
The best designer is not the designer who works a lot. Is the best designer is a lazy designer who minimizes the amount of like decisions that have to be made, and that like ideas are machines that you create and that work for you and make the work for you after. So
what I wanted to add is that the same thing happened to me about like 3 weeks ago when I ran out of steps I made up for myself for this project, and I was working on and on, just doing stuff, and then at the moment it was clear that I needed to find somewhat a focus and to bind all the things that I did together, because they were like super separate. And what I did, so I had those, I think it was about 3 days, and I don't really remember them because I was struggling so much that I was like thinking what I'm gonna do. So I think they happened like in a day, those 3 days. But what I did at the end is that I just got back to my notes and to the system that I created previously, and I just combined I guess it like 3 ideas, or I would say systems, from those 3 different things, and I combined it into one.
Yeah, I find a lot of comfort in coming back to my older notes and older thoughts, and like finding, for me it's one of the most rewarding moments actually in my work when I come back to something that I did before, and
because
like reiterated. And I
previously I was thinking that going back to anything is a really, really bad thing, and that was stopping me a lot with the projects. And I think that's the thing that I realized maybe this year, maybe last year, is that going back to the things you do and how you do them is a good thing. You shouldn't be afraid to do so, because usually we taught to like come up with something new each time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think like it's impossible like it's impossible to copy somebody's work ideally 100%. Like you're still gonna add something from yourself. The same way it's impossible to completely copy what you did before, because you were also a different person now. Like the person you were when you wrote those notes and you made those things does not exist anymore. So yeah, I agree that it's a good thing. I also just an allegory came to my mind just now. I think you could compare this organization and those systems to a corset. So like sometimes a corset is thought of as like a very rigid structure that's very restricting, and it can be that way, but it also provides a great amount of support. And even though it's putting you in a framework, it's much easier to exist within it, because like it kind of gives you this structure and this again stability. So yeah, it's an ambiguous thing, and I think it's very important to be cautious of it and to be mindful.
I think I wanted to like approach this sort of segment a bit later, but it just out on the surface. What I want to like note is that systems for you are the search for stability, and all this decision making comes from my point of view, pure anxiety. But I might be wrong, and maybe it's just the way your brain works, because I genuinely don't understand how this thing works, how this process for you works, because I try to create system, but I fail at it every time.
That's because you're a Libra.
All my systems.
Easy.
Yeah. Wait. Not. I forgot. We wanted to invite Masha so that she tells everyone that we just Tauruses and that it's just one day apart from our birthdays.
We'll ask her to record us a voice memo on how this is all explained by the fact that we're both Tauruses and we're born 2 days apart. Yeah. It just makes sense, guys.
Okay. If Masha can, here is an audio of her explaining why Tauruses could dabble in systems and why Libras are really bad at it. Thank you.
So, as the girls have just said, they are born only 1 day apart. Astrologically, this means that the planets that they are born under have not had enough time yet to move too far away from each other, and that their natal charts are very similar. Both Nat and Masha have their Sun, Mercury, and Mars in Taurus and their Venus in Aries, as well as having many of the aspects between their planets exactly identical. Since we are talking about work, strategies, and methods here, I decided to focus on just a few placements that I think could be the main contributors to certain patterns of behavior associated with that, particularly the Sun, Mercury, and Mars signs. For those unfamiliar with astrology, your Sun sign is your basic zodiac sign that rules over your ego. Your Mercury sign is the sign that rules over your thinking patterns and communication. Your Mars sign rules over your drives and passions in life, as well as, in my opinion, is a great indicator of the types of methods you employ when trying to reach a certain goal. An interesting similarity that I noticed between the two girls is that they have their Sun and their Mars in a house ruled by Mercury. A house in astrology is an area of life in which certain planets are activated. Nat's Sun and Mars are in her 6th house, which is ruled by Virgo and ruled by Mercury. And Masha's Sun and Mars are both in the 3rd house, which is ruled by Gemini, that is also ruled by Mercury. This gives their Sun and their Mars a cerebral tint, which I think is very evident in everything that they were talking about previously. However, even though both girls really like systemizing, organizing, categorizing information, and this is kind of the main drive behind their practice, the way that they wield this desire has slight differences. The 6th house, which is ruled by Virgo, is the house that rules over schedules, organizations, routines. Ironic. And so Nat's way of dealing with this is, I would say, more rigid. And as she herself says, that sometimes she feels like the work that she does is dry or lacks excitement, right? And is strict and organized. Her method in this case becomes something that is very by the book, and the steps are clear cut, and the steps all derive from each other. Whereas Masha's, as she herself has said, is slightly different, because this flighty Gemini energy gives her the desire to shuffle things around and to kind of stay, while trying to organize things, still stay a little bit more free in her options. And like she said, she actually sometimes comes up with a few ideas and then combines them at the very end stage of a project, which I think is a very Gemini way of handling these situations. In this case, we also can't forget about their Mercury sign, which is in Taurus, which already indicates that their thinking patterns and the way that they communicate are similar. But the houses that their Mercury is in, I think, also adds a slight variation. In particular, that they were talking about something that I think is kind of even, like, the accuracy is kind of even funny to me. Nat was speaking about how she likes to go back to certain things that she had done previously, whereas Masha said that she never does that, and maybe that's something that she needs to work on, like she said. I think that is a very, again, like a reinforcement of that Virgo versus Gemini energy. This kind of like more anxious mulling over and constantly like overthinking Virgo energy, and that kind of more flighty Gemini energy, like, oh, I'm done with this, so I'm just going to move on to the next thing. And in their Mercury signs, Nat's is in the 4th house, which is ruled by Cancer, and it is ruled by the moon. That is the house of foundations and the house of our emotions. Masha's Mercury is in the 2nd house, which ironically enough is the house of Taurus, which rules that immediate material and physical environment. And I think that in this case, you can see that their Mercury and Taurus desire to stay on the topics that are easily digestible and the topics that are tangible. As Nat has said, that sometimes she likes making things more than coming up with ideas. And this kind of like fixation on bringing things to life and on seeing the physical results of their work, I think is something that they have in common. But it's undeniable that Nat's recollection of her work and the way that she goes about it is tinted more by emotions because of that Mercury in the 4th house, unlike Masha's. So they both have this desire to create things and make them tangible. And that's not to say that they are unable to handle abstract ideas. Of course they do. But if the preference, the choice comes up, they will always prefer to stick to like a route that doesn't have, like Masha said, surprises. Like everything is predictable and you can kind of see a few steps ahead of where you are, rather than kind of be in this set of ambiguous pool of ideas. I also just want to throw in like an extra little comment about their moon signs. Nat has her moon in Capricorn and Masha has her moon in Aquarius. And I think that this emotional connection through the moon can give us just a slight insight into why these strategies work the way that they do. In particular, Nat has said that she would like to eliminate, that she seeks stability to eradicate her anxiety, which I think is a very Capricorn moon type of behavior. Whereas for Masha, as an Aquarius moon, organizing and systemizing things are a way to make sure that she stays on track and a way to make sure that she kind of has her shit together, so to speak. So yeah, I hope that this was somewhat insightful or relatable or whatever. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Masha. But coming back to it, do you really think that it's your like sort of personality and the way your brain works, or is it just the fact that you try to avoid as much anxiety as you could?
I would say that it's totally the way we function in our lives. And for me personally is that I just don't like unexpected stuff, so that I plan like everything.
This is the most Taurus thing I've ever heard in my entire life. I'm sorry. I just hate unpredictability. I just hate unexpected stuff. Like, come on. What else do you like? Food and sleeping? And staying inside?
But it is true. And also...
Yeah, sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah, and also it's in a way of gaining profit, I would say, from different aspects, even saving time. So, for example, the way I do my coffee in the morning and the way I cook my breakfast is a very action and time based. So I know what I'm doing. So, for example, first I go and I press the button on the coffee machine, then I pick up the food I do while the coffee machine is loading, and all that stuff. So I don't like wasting my time and waiting, maybe.
Dude, so we've been in quarantine for 2 months almost, right? And I think out of those 2 months, I've eaten the same exact breakfast for like a month and a half. And when I don't eat the same breakfast, it's because I'm out of like oatmeal. And I brew my coffee exactly the same way. I measure the same amount of grams of my coffee beans. I know that like what I need to do in which order to be the most efficient.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking
and it's
about.
Just like, yeah.
It's really funny
we
because
suck.
It's really funny because I'm like a chaotic evil version of you.
It's true.
I'm
It's
just
so true.
I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know and I'm quite an anxious person, and I have OCD, so I could be more chaotic if I didn't have any mental issues. But
oh my god! Oh my god! I'm sorry. This is gonna sound kind of harsh, but thank God, because otherwise we would just not be able to handle you. Like it's pretty hard already to handle the chaos. But oh my god! Oh
yeah, that's true. But what I relate to within this systematization and the way our brain works is the fact that my OCD just turned into a mental psychiatric podcast. Bear with us. So I systemize my memories and feelings into boxes in my mind, and I can't do it any other way. There's a box of good memories, there's a box of bad memories, there's a box of I should feel this way, box I should feel this way, and this, like, I really relate to what you're saying only within this matter. Do you have the same thing, or it's just me?
I never really thought of it, to be honest, in that sense, which I guess means that it's not true for me.
Okay.
I would also say that I actually tend to forget and not remember bad memories.
Lucky you, damn.
Well, I have a box of repressed memories, so
trauma, I call it spicy memories.
Yeah. So okay. Thank you for this little psychiatric talk. I think we go back to graphic design. what I want to ask you is, how do you start? I think it's like a really huge step to start designing your systems and start to like tackle your project. What I thought while writing this sort of script for this podcast is maybe this research. Maybe you start with research and you organize information and then you go from it. What is your process, basically?
The easiest way for me to jumpstart something is to work from something that already exists. I think that's why I tend to work a lot with like found materials and found imagery. Like my FMP project is entirely based around found imagery. And for me, like actually the hardest stage of the project is creating something from a blank slate. So yeah, I think for me, I just like find things that are like interesting for me, or that I'm curious about, or that intrigue me, and then I just like research around them, and then I kind of combine them, and something new emerges from that. So it's like it's a very like it's a very postmodern way of working, but yeah, I just like I never feel like I'm creating something new. It's always just me like reiterating something, remaking something.
Mm-hmm. It's actually very similar to what we actually did with this project, is that the first step we did was 20 slides presentation with all the interests you have, with like thoughts, ideas, and so on. And then remember, Sebastian basically combined them for us in those little topics. Mm-hmm. And then we researched and figure out what we wanted to do. So that's the point when you decided and made the first choice, and then as we already talked is that you just base other choices on that one. So for me, the first step is just to actually start, not with the specific one. The first action you did might be not the leading one, for example.
Yeah.
So you just collect different things, and then systemize them and go further.
Why I asked this question about research is that looking at your projects like from a outsider perspective, I do feel like you organize your research really differently from me, and it's a system on its own. Because, for example, Nat works with found imagery, and you categorize all the images, so you already are starting to systemize what you found. And Masha, you are doing a sort of primary research on the tickets you have on the artifact, by also organizing everything. You scanned everything, you divided everything into groups, you analyzed the groups, you found similarities between these groups. So it's not a matter of only like primary research and like Googling stuff, but a matter of a secondary research where you actually starting doing stuff with the stuff you found. Does it make sense?
I don't think the secondary research is that you are doing something with it. Secondary research is how to say, is still the exploring the topic or the thing you work with, but not specifically working with it. But what I want to say is that I agree that I like to start projects and I like doing projects that are more tactile, and like I like and tend to work with the real stuff. However, I really enjoy to code and to create those things that just are numbers and words, and then they create something and you're like, whoa, what is that?
Because coding is essentially creating systems. I remember when we were working with Vasya last year on the website for the Rietveld workshop, Vasya wrote like a portion of the code, and I looked at it and I was just terrified because it was so unorganized. It was so chaotic.
Yes.
And with, like, for me, the most beautiful thing is like those, like, when everything is like indented the same amount and everything is just like in these same chunks, and like when you find like a clever and elegant way to solve a problem efficiently, it's just so rewarding and so pleasing, and it's just like the best. So yeah, coding, I think, is very natural. It's a very like it's a very natural. Like I'm not surprised at all that we both ended up working with code in some extent. Like for you made this website with the calendar and the clock, and I made this little like website that is essentially a tool for me, so it's not like really an outcome, but just like a tool. So yeah, I think it's
actually that website isn't the outcome as well for me. But okay. But also you remember I did at the beginning that Python code as well. That was a helping thing.
Sure.
But coming back to what Lesya said, I think well, she said that it's different how it started, but now I just think that it's not, and that's generally because of the thing we chose. I guess if I would have worked with a greater amount of those tickets, then I would have picked the system and the process that Nat's doing. And if she and if she chose only one picture of fish, then she would do the same things that I did, for example.
Yeah, that makes sense. But again, I think the fact that you've chosen existing material and started working with it, categorizing it and systemizing it, makes much more sense that you are trying to avoid other possible solutions and decision makings, and you are like trying to work from what is already existent.
Yeah, for sure.
So it makes sense. Because I'm doing completely different stuff. I'm coming up with new stuff every week.
Your project just sounds like a nightmare. I don't like you had to make so many decisions. You had to come up with so much stuff and
argue for them.
I just think I didn't want to bore myself. That's why I chose it, and I don't have a really good concentration levels, so focus levels. So I immediately understood that I could not work with one thing or a collection of things. I guess also what naturally comes from our conversation is the fact that you tend to work with the same processes in your practice and in your project in general. For example, screen printing, scanning, reprinting, and all that stuff. Do you think there's a connection to this, the fact that you like systems? Because these processes are quite an organized, consecutive processes. At least I can see them as them. Do you have the same connection?
Well, for me, I think especially screen printing, it's a very mechanical process, and especially the way I do screen printing, right? So I don't just so for me, I use screen printing not as just a mean of producing the thing that I'm making. It's very much a big part of what I'm actually making. So I think on one hand, I just enjoy the process itself, and I also, same as Masha, enjoy working with tactile things and creating tactile things and things that are like physical. But also, yeah, I think it's just another degree of mechanization and automation, sort of.
For example, again, for me, screen printing is not an option because it's just too many steps. I can't focus, and it's really hard for me technically. Although I do enjoy the results, but for example, video making is really like it's up my alley because it's really intuitive. At least I see it that way, because you sort of compile the information and in a very specific way, the way you think the viewer would enjoy, and it's really different from this consecutive process of doing something step by step, like scanning step by step.
But that's
step by step.
That's what I'm talking about. Is that for me, editing a video is a step by step process as well. So for example, how I used to do it is that I look through all the footage I have. I pick the best things that I wanted to add. Then I choose music, for example, because for me, music was like the most important thing in the video. Then I decide which ones I want to place at the beginning and which ones at the end. Then I add title. So I automate all of those.
It's really funny because what I do is just I put everything onto the in the program, and then I just look through it while editing at the same time. Like
Here you go.
Watch it, then cut, watch, cut, delete, and it just then it's footage. It's fine.
I can't edit video for shit. I think exactly because there's not like a method I can apply to it. It's not a thing you can calculate. You just have to do it kind of intuitively. And all the videos that I ever made were super structured, and I think that's why they're not really not that good, because
I don't think they're bad. I think they're cinematically they're not the best, but they're like they have an interesting concept.
I think whenever this like structuring can become a part of the concept of the video, when, for example, my video with the Russian flag, it's super structured. Like, it's the fact that it's a video is almost an accident. It easily could have been something else,
like a
website or a series of prints or like a book. And I think one important thing, like word that we haven't mentioned yet, is repetition. And for me, repetition is like the main kind of driver of what I do and the main method that I apply at large. So I just like do one thing and then I repeat it multiple times and it fetches different results. And within my project, everything is in multiples. So I have a series of prints. I have a website that generates a series of images. I have like a series of books. So everything is repeated over and over again, and repetition is actually what creates variety. And with you, I think it's a very different kind of variety. So you just like generate something completely new and something completely unrelated to what happened before every week. So you try your best to not repeat yourself, and my entire project and Masha's project as well to some extent is entirely based on repetition. The ideal way of working around this concept of systematization is to create a system that's stiff enough to support you, yet flexible enough to allow you to make interesting decisions and choices.
Yeah. What it all comes to in the end, I think it's what I began with, and what I came to within my project is that creating systems, designing systems, processing systems, and generally presenting the information is graphic design. When someone asks me what graphic design is, I would say creating systems and presenting them to people.
I'll say that it's only for this time. Maybe, I think graphic design will change as it's changed from the beginning, I would say. So like graphic design now is about that, but it's not going to be about that as well in the future, maybe. Because I'm just remembering the debate that we read between Jan van Toorn and Wim Crowell. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think of the future of graphic design it's kind of this debate. However, the debate happened years ago. Maybe graphic design is about those debates, you know? Whether you decide on a system or you lack and you allow a system to break.
Yeah,
That's
I think
true.
this conversation has been happening for decades now and will continue happening. Like whether it's just like it's this. I think it's usually the same question, but it's just like it's often the same question, but it's just like applied on different levels and applied to different things.
To be honest, we went through the whole script that I've written, and it has never happened
Yay!
while we have recorded podcasts, and I think it's a good thing.
We're so organized.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Who'd have thought?
I would say that this podcast, our listeners might think that we are crazy machines, but we are not.
We're not. Yeah.
We're not.
No. People would listen and they would divide into two groups. One would say, "What are they talking about?" It's like it's super obvious. Why are they even making the podcast?
Yeah.
And the other group would be like, "What the fuck?
What are they talking about?
Yeah.
Nobody does that. I think I personally think that one of the most important things that we touched upon during this talk is the fact that however mechanical those systems might look from the outside, they stem from our qualities as human beings and from very organic things. So it's not that it's those systems don't I'm trying to be like super philosophical here, but I just can't talk.
They don't define us?
Well, they're like, they're not an add-on. They're just like an integral part of us as humans and as live creatures.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think it concludes the whole conversation, and it was a really nice conversation, even though it was in a different setting and we are just talking on the phone with each other. It turned out really nice, I think. And thank you for that, Masha and Natasha.
Thank you too.
Thank
It
you
was-
too.